on now. Okay, so Dave, well, first of all, let's I'd like to welcome all of our Living Wisdom Mindset School to our first live coaching seminar, and I'd like to also introduce Mr. David Riddell. There, now let me just, there you are there. Okay, awesome. So great to have you, Dave, and looking forward to your answers to the questions today.
Yeah, nice to be here, Darren, and congratulations to everybody who's on board, signed up for Living Wisdom. Thanks to Darren for his ability and work to make all this possible. This is the fulfillment of prophecy, fulfillment of a dream that's probably 30 years old. And so it's a momentous occasion for all of us, yeah?
Yeah, that's great, Dave. So I just want to, just before, Dave, we get into the questions, I'm just going to run through a couple of housekeeping things. So as I said, I'd like to welcome everybody. We've got 73 students in the school, so we're really thrilled about that. Just a couple of housekeeping things. So first of all, make sure you read the rules of engagement as far as the online forum goes. Just give you a real sense of the do's and the don'ts as far as that goes. Keep your eyes on the news. And also, I've got some information in the news posted on the 12th of September about how you can adjust the number of emails that are coming into your email box. So I've had a couple of people who have asked me about that. So if you want to change your settings, go there. I'd also like to just say, hey, well done. Some great questions have come through. So thanks to everybody who's contributed to the questions for our live coaching session. And we will be wrapping up at 6 o'clock. So just so that you're aware of that. And also, just for the future, just make sure you ask generic questions rather than questions that are specific to your life. So just something to remember there. And what I've done is I've actually grouped the questions around topic, and where it's been specific, I've generalized the questions. So what we're going to do is shortly I'm going to hand back to Dave, and Dave's going to talk us through initially the philosophy of living wisdom, and then we're going to get into the questions. And so, yeah, I'm really excited and looking forward to this session. So I'm going to hand over to Dave.
All right, thanks, Darren. And I guess the question must be, first of all, why living wisdom? There's an awful lot of self-help, self-growth, pop site courses out there covering all kinds of topics and possibilities. So why would you choose living wisdom? The answer might run like this. Wisdom is a moderate approach to counseling that's somewhere between directive and non-directive. We do hold to the doctrine of absolute truth. We do understand that there's a right way and a wrong way to live. And we do make the distinction between relative truth and absolute truth fairly carefully as we work through advice giving, wisdom, and understanding philosophy of success. I love success, and my search for success has brought me to living wisdom in a way that means it will not let you down. It's been well tested over many, many years. Nothing you're going to learn here is going to set you up for humiliation, embarrassment, failure, or betrayal. Having said that, feel free to think for yourself, question for yourself, debate and argue until you're fully convinced. Why? Because living wisdom philosophy runs on the need to be fully persuaded. That's why we don't advertise ourselves as person-centered, client-centered, or merely as paraphrasers or facilitators. We actually do give advice and direction in living wisdom philosophy, but more are we bullying or authoritarian or dominating or dogmatic. And so that's why I say we're steering a middle way somewhere down between the two, and a coaching role modeling is a good role model to pick up on. And we are looking for people who can coach in living wisdom as a result of their studies. More about that later. Now, my belief over many thousands of hours of counseling is show me your trouble and I'll show you your misbelief. And all day, every day, practically, I spend my life helping people find a traitor and bringing them to the point of crisis. So living wisdom revolves around a point of crisis whereby the king must expel the traitor. And so to find that traitor can be difficult or even traumatic, but the king must be brought to the point where they find the traitor, the king lie, the misbelief, the wrong concept, and they bring it to conscious realization, and then they have the choice, yes or no, friend or enemy, asset or liability. And this point of crisis is something that I will teach you how to bring, first of all, yourself to, so that you take the log out of your own eye, and then secondly, that you can bring others to help them. How you do that is important. We're not into jugular cutting or brutality or any kind of arrogant pronouncements from the living wisdom throne. We are helping people struggle with something that has had them in its grip for often many, many years. So to do it humanely, compassionately, and gently as we can, without fudging the issue. They've got a traitor in their army. And so much of what we teach, keep that moment of crisis in mind. Are you for it or against it? And keep the fact that what you're learning has been born out of thousands of hours of experimenting and experiencing. We take the best of psychology, we take the best of philosophy, and we take the best of Christian faith and bring it all together in a potent brew. At least I think you'll discover that it's a potent brew. Thanks for your feedback as we go through. And remember that we're setting up support structures, discussion, and tutoring as you might need it. And if we open up more than we sew up, we're sorry. But if you hang in there, you'll find that you will get the tools to sew up whatever's been opened up in the talks. All this by way of orientation as to what living wisdom is all about and where it sits. It will not make you, this course will not make you a professional counselor, but it'll certainly set you up to be in a far better space for professional training and for intellectually thinking straight and for honest self-revelation, disclosure and discussion. All right, I hope that makes sense. Back to you, Darren.
Thanks, Dave. And I think another thing that I'd add to that is just the improvement in EQ, in the emotional intelligence. I really believe that living wisdom raises people's EQ as well as impacting on their IQ. So, Dave, we're going to head into the questions now. And the first set of questions are around the fundamental about having an internal sense of security and belonging. So the questions really are, the question is how? How do I develop an internal sense of security and belonging? And can you give us some examples of the kind of self-talk and alternative strategies, that kind of stuff that might help in this area?
Yes, the idea of internalizing your sense of security and belonging is so that it doesn't remain in people or in places or in things. Hoarders have their sense of security and stuff they hoard. Relationship addicts and codependents, their security is in other people. Your safety and belonging can come from joining the gang or the club or the church or being on the in-group. But at some point, you've got to say, I need to take my worth, my value, and my security out of people's hands, out of situations, out of places, out of materialism. I need to have it within me, because ultimately I can't take any of that stuff with me. And so internalizing it is exemplified by the turtle that takes its house with it wherever it goes. So wherever you are, you're still special, you're still important, you still belong there, and wherever you are, you're okay. But you cannot believe that as long as you're leaving it up to other people, and just like a child, getting your worth from a toy or mummy and daddy or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You've got to come to know who you are, and that leads you straight into individuation. And the degree to which you've individuated is the degree to which you're on your own 2 feet. But it begins by giving up the idea that other people can tell you what you're worth, remembering that if they give you your worth and value, they can take it off you whenever they're having a bad day or in a bad mood or in a vendetta. It's too insecure. As Jesus said to the Pharisees, how can you believe in me when what people think of you is just so important? The compass can't read true north if there's some other agenda there, pulling it around, something that they rely on to know who they are and what they're worth. So it does begin with renouncing that false source of worth and value and coming back to your only true source, remembering that you are needed, you belong, and you're loved, no matter what people say to you. Life is not a popularity contest.
So, Dave, if you're struggling to get fully persuaded in this area, what might some tips or strategies be?
Well, it begins by just remembering that I'll always be insecure if this person decides what I'm worth. And I'll always be unsafe if I believe I am just not enough. I am enough. I exist because God needs me to. And so we've got to think very carefully about what we're building our life on. You're not only as good as your last performance. You're not only as good as the value of your clothes, your latest fashion statement, your car, or your house. All of these things cannot tell you who you are. If your house burns down and your best friend pinches your boyfriend or your girlfriend, or you're out of fashion, or you're not popular, you can't afford to be devastated by that stuff. And so even your body does not have the key to your significance. And so it's thinking very carefully about what you will place your significance in and giving up the old sources.
Okay, Dave, we've got a secondary question that I think is quite interesting here. What is the balance between not looking for approval from others with my primary love language, feeling loved and appreciated when people say words of affirmation to me? So I've got this primary love language and I'm trying to work out how to hold on to my sense of approval and keep that sense of worth within myself.
Hey, I like to feel cared for, loved and approved of. That's to be human. You don't need to give up your enjoyment at being cared for or approved of. I like people to like me. Of course I do. I wouldn't be human if I didn't. But I follow a Christ who was willing to be sacrificed on a rubbish heap outside the city to do the will of his Father. And for me, doing the will of my Father has to be the one thing that is ground zero for me. And so, of course, I like it when people respect or like me, but if they don't, I don't lose sleep over it. Why? Because it's an insecure place to be. So one of my little reassurances is, hey, if the cap fits, wear it, but if it doesn't, give it back. I try the cap on. If I'm rejected or disapproved of, I check it out. But if it doesn't, I just give it back. Why? Because I cannot afford to build my life on people's approval. Having said that, it's always nice to be approved of, but I'm not going to be devastated if I don't feel cared for. That's insecurity, and it sets me up for codependency, and I have to get past that to build a relationship on a proper foundation.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so the next couple of questions are in relation to expectation. realistic expectations. So the first question is, if our expectations are on a subconscious level, what is the best way to bring them into the conscious so that we can deal with them?
Yeah, well, it's the empowering question. Whenever you think surfacing the subconscious, think empowering question. Whenever you think looking at anything subconscious, the empowering question is the way forward. And a serious portion of expectations do lie in the subconscious. And self-awareness is constituted by what are my expectations and are they too high or too low? Parents must remember to do this with children. Teachers must remember to do this with pupils. Counselors must remember to do this with clients. Are my expectations actually realistic? Are they idealistic? Too high, in which case I'll get snappy and snotty and angry and frustrated and grumpy. Or are they too low, in which case it's Hakuna Matata, everybody, anything goes, no worries, and let's all be too laid back. And I often think that marijuana is a drug of choice for people whose expectations are continually being set too high, and they use the marijuana to try and reset them or lower them. But you don't need a drug to do it. You just need to learn how to say, you know what, I need to be kind to myself. I need to be gentler to myself, and you actually do it. If you can be kind to a child or a puppy, you can be kind to yourself.
Okay, Dave. So this question is expectation in relation to our Christian faith. You mentioned that good enough is good enough, but my struggle is always, when is the sacrifice enough for Jesus? When have I truly laid my whole life down as sacrifice for the cross? I often feel like it's never enough.
Well, the good news is that when we teach you about the vicarious Christ, you're going to discover that it's not about faith in your own sacrifice, and it's not about faith in your own commitment, and it's not about faith in how good you are. And Paul said, indeed, I do not even judge myself. You might want to meditate on that verse for a while. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. And the reason that he could say that is because his faith was not in himself. It was in the vicarious sacrifice of Jesus to his Father. So it's about the Father that we're all about. And Jesus already made the ultimate sacrifice, but he didn't do it for himself. He did it for you. And the realization comes that actually I've already done enough sacrifice by virtue of my faith in Jesus, the vicarious human. Adam was disobedient on my behalf. Jesus was perfectly obedient on my behalf. I need to relax in that and just go for the ride. Once you've understood that and you're well grounded in that, there's no more striving. There's no more fear of being inadequate all the time. There's no more sense that I'm never good enough, because Jesus was good enough with my name on it 2,000 years ago. And that is the ultimate source of self-esteem, self-worth, and inner security, which psychology is still missing. When psychology and salvation meet, amazing things happen. But you need to get into the vicarious Christ study, and we'll be talking about that later, further down the track. In the meantime, please understand that he doesn't need perfection from you. He already has that in Jesus. What he needs from you is your friendship. What he needs from you is to walk with him and talk with him and get inspired so that your commitment becomes stronger and more focused. Commitment is simply as good as the inspiration that precedes it. So get the vision, get inspired, and then just walk with him.
Wow, that's exciting stuff. What about, where does the perfectionist sit in this, and what's driving them?
Well, we love excellence, and we'd love to have something perfect, but perfection is always beyond your reach, no matter what you do. And no matter how hard you try, accept the fact that perfection is always beyond your reach. There's only one man who could ever walk on water. And you've got to get your head around that. Jesus is your perfection. is not for you to try and keep replicating that. And realize too that perfectionism is a form of self-righteousness, which is unacceptable to God. By all means, go for excellence. By all means, compete with yourself and doing a better and better job. And don't keep being so terrified that you'll get slack and lazy the moment you decide good enough is good enough. It's just the economies of effort. Don't be afraid of it. You're not going to goof off and become an idiot just because you give yourself permission to say good enough is good enough. Of course, what we want is good enough. And of course, we want our heart surgeon and our airline pilot to be perfect in their craft. But actually, they're not either. And we also have to teach the control freak that total control is always outside of the realms of possibility. The control freak must learn that they can never, ever have complete control.
Dave, can you just give a little bit more clarity around the economies of effort?
Well, last time you vacuumed the floor, you practiced it. Very, very few people have ever done a perfect vacuuming job on the floor, but the 80-20 kicks in. You know, you try and get 80% of the result with 20% of the effort, because you know that to get perfection is going to take another 80%. It's just the economies of effort. Whether you're cleaning your teeth or vacuuming the floor or cleaning the windows, going for perfect is going to be a waste of your time, and it's not going to yield the results you actually need. And men seem to grasp this quicker and easier than women. I don't know why, but you don't really understand a man or how he thinks until you grasp the economies of effort. But it's a bit like, you know, vacuuming the floor before your parents come around. You do what you can as quick as you can with whatever time you've got. That's the economies of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dave, now we're moving on to thinking about the past and getting past the past. So we've got a couple of questions in here. Can I really become comfortable with the past to the point that other people's mention of it doesn't faze me?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, this is one of the goals of successful psychotherapy. One of the goals of successful psychotherapy is to become friends with the past, so that even the regret serves you and you don't get crippled by the humiliation or the embarrassment or the shame that hangs around with regret. Yes, you can remind me of things I'd rather forget in my own life, but once I've turned them into lessons, once I've turned them into stages, once I've turned them into steps up in my life, I'm no longer ashamed or embarrassed. The redemption of Christ has to work backwards as well as forwards, and that's how it does it. The salvation of Jesus can go back into your past and transform your greatest regrets until they become sources of hunger, wisdom, curiosity, and compassion. And once that's happened, then they have indeed been redeemed. But as long as you're embarrassed about them, burying them, denying them, running from them, hiding from them, and avoiding anybody who reminds you of them, you're just showing me you haven't let salvation of Jesus work backwards, and you certainly haven't benefited by the lessons implicit in those big, huge, whopping mistakes.
Okay, so so if I am struggling with the past and I keep realizing that it's coming up and affecting me, what are some of the how-tos that are going to help me to actually resolve that?
Well, it's always a good idea to get counseling from someone who knows their way around these things, because you can make more progress in 60 minutes with an efficient, wise counselor than you might make in 60 years by yourself, left to your own devices. Secondly, memorize Genesis 50:20 and Romans 8:28. Commit them to memory, recite them until you understand them, and then practice them. God really does work in all things for good once you look up and start learning. And even Joseph realized that his time in Potiphar's prison was all for good once he'd figured out what was going on. And so do understand that every failure is a lesson waiting for you to get it. And once you get the lesson, it's no longer a true failure.
Okay, so here's a question. I get stuck in replaying past events. I also struggle with the fear that if I forgive them, they will do it again. However, I do realize I don't need to trust them, but how do I keep myself safe around them?
Yeah, the key there is that if you are letting it go and you are forgiving them, you do need to communicate what they got wrong, and you do need to tell them how they need to earn your trust back. Because only as they learn how to earn your trust back can you let your guard down, let your walls down, trust them and relate to them again. An expression of regret is the first thing you should ask for. And until they express their regret, they won't be friends. They won't be trusted. They may not even be welcome in your house. And you do have to communicate that. That takes some courage. It takes some conviction. It takes some gut and some grit and some determination. But hey, if you're going to walk straight and walk true and be honest with people and speak the truth in love as we are commanded to do, you do need to tell them what they need to do to earn your trust back. And an apology means, I regret what I did and I want you to reassess me. And if they say sorry, but they're not specific, then please pull them up on it and ask them to be specific about what it exactly is that they regret. Otherwise, the sorry word just causes more confusion.
Okay, so we're moving now on to questions around accepting correction. And so I'm just going to pick out a part of this question where it says, the struggle for me is to be influenced too much or too easily by others. Sometimes that accepting correction is taken for granted, but the struggle is being influenced too much or too easily by others. Sometimes I can feel tossed around, and I'd like to find a healthy balance.
Well, all children start out by being influenced by others. That's where we start. We don't have our own copy of wisdom and truth and perspective. We build that as we are influenced by others. So it's fine to hear all sides of the story and be tossed and turned for a while. That's childhood, that's studenthood, and that's learning. But just don't keep thinking for yourself. Keep thinking. Don't stop thinking for yourself. As you think for yourself, it gradually dawns on you whose perspective is the better one, the more reliable one. And as you listen to a few different perspectives and get influenced by all of them, you start to learn who's got the goods, and you start to figure out, actually, my perspective on this is superior or just as valuable. And it'll make you a good listener, but you've got to be able to come back with something when you stop listening. Otherwise, your listening will lead you into collusion. And the only thing that'll stop you from colluding is having your own perspective, your own point of view, and your own sense of reality. I'm reluctant to say having your own truth, because if I do that, we've got to work out, are we talking about absolute truth or relative truth? Truth is not privatized, but you should have your own perspective and you should have your own opinion by the time you're in your 20s. But let's face it, we're all learning, and whether the subject is sexuality or politics or theology, we're all learning, and we're all going to be influenced to begin with. As we keep thinking for ourselves, it becomes more clear to us what we ourselves actually think.
Okay, so in a relationship where there is a lot of blame shifting, it can get confusing as to what is really my responsibility and a needed correction versus just another blame shift. How do I handle this?
Well, try the cap on first of all and see if it fits. Don't hand the cap straight back without even trying it on, or you just end up chucking caps at each other. Check it out. If it doesn't fit, give it back. with the notation, actually, there's no evidence to suggest this fits. I think this cap says more about you than about me. That's not an arrogant thing to say. It's a necessary thing to say if, in honesty, you cannot wear the blame and you cannot put your hand up. But for every person who wears the blame inappropriately, there's two people that don't want to know. They won't even try the cap. So keep that one in mind. You don't need to apologize for what you don't regret. And being so apologetic isn't actually helpful. It's just a childhood survival kit to avoid conflict. And you're going to become a pleaser. And a pleaser doesn't please anybody, including yourself. But I would say make the person feel heard before you put it back on them. You're a good persuader, but you might be a lousy listener. And people don't back off or give up or let go until they feel heard. You'll find that when a person is outraged and they're threatening death and liability, often all it takes is for them to feel heard before they can let it go. So please make a person feel heard before you start blame shifting.
And if they're in fact are in a habit of blame shifting, then what kind of pushbacks could you employ that might help you to gain a balance of power behavior?
You could ask them, what's the unbearable feeling you're so terrified of that you can't put your hand up and say, my bad? Why can't you put your hand up when it's obviously your issue? Why are you so frightened to say, I stuffed up? Usually it'll be feeling guilty, condemned, humiliated, or ashamed. And so, Eve blamed Adam and Adam blamed Eve simply because they couldn't bear the shame. And it's true that if people haven't got into the habit of putting their hand up and confessing my bad, then eventually they can't do it at all because they're too frightened of feeling guilty.
So we keep dancing around our UBFs.
It's the old story, first the unbearable feeling, then the survival kit, and then the fight. That's the sequence. I get it every day in counselling office.
Okay, Dave, we're moving on to balancing of head and heart. And one of the videos you talked about, the mind informs the emotions, but the emotions celebrate the mind. And we're just wanting a little bit more of a clarification around that idea of, but the emotions celebrate the mind.
I remember thinking at 6 years old, well, if it hurts too much to feel, then I'm just not going to feel anymore. And the walls went down and the drawbridge went up and I stopped feeling. And from then on, I became Mr. Logical and Mr. Analytical. But the result of that is always depression. It stands to reason that if I shut down my feelings to avoid a scary emotion, I'll soon lose enthusiasm for life. And one of the major causes of depression is shutting down your emotions so you won't hurt. My feeling is that women can celebrate life, men can think about life, and we've got to get the male brain and the female brain together so that we can celebrate what we know with joy, with laughter, with tears, with emotion. But we mustn't shut down thinking, reason, and logical analysis and just live and wallow in our emotions. So that would lead to emotion-driven reasoning rather than truth-based reasoning. And many times a man will try to argue his woman out of her feelings and gets absolutely nowhere. And she won't trust his logic because it contradicts her feelings. And so you get the stalemate of the genders and the stalemate of the left brain, right brain dispute. So what I would say is I want to be able to feel, but I want to be able to protect my feelings with thinking. And I want to know that my mind can inform my emotions but my emotions can celebrate what I know.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're talking about wise trust. How can you trust a new person to be your spouse when you have been betrayed by secrets in the past?
You know, it's always a judgment call to know whether we should trust everybody until they prove themselves untrustworthy, because that can lead you to being naive and sucked in and hurt and ripped off, or whether we should advise people be cynical, be skeptical until they earn your trust and warm to them slowly, because that can result in standoffishness, snobbery, shyness, and cynicism. So there's always a very delicate balance there, that you go into new territory slowly, like feeling the depth of the swimming pool or the sea. You just go in cautiously, but you do go in. And that means that as trust is earned, you give them more and more and more. But it also means that when they press on your bruises, instead of lashing out or considering they have betrayed you or that they're a complete turkey, you say, hey, hang on a minute, is that an overreaction? And if so, is that a bruise, an unbearable feeling? And if so, that was then, this is now, and this person is not just like that person. So as you get your head around that, you don't allow those echoes and unbearable feelings to swamp your comprehension and perception of this person. And if you're marrying somebody after being bruised by parents or a first wife, spouse, girlfriend, cheater, unfaithful, dominating, bully, patronizing, larrikin, whatever, you've really got to get a bit of pre-marriage counseling to make sure that you know how to step around those echoes when the avalanche rolls down and they smash into you from behind. There's no substitute for a bit of pre-marriage counseling if you're going into a relationship after being bruised, or you're going into a relationship with an already bruised person. They are going to lash out when those ghosts hit. And if you get in the way, God help the relationship.
Okay, so this question is in relation to self-talk. And it's a question, I guess, really for you, Dave, and it's, do you personally have a key question you ask yourself to identify your self-talk? Do you daily set aside time to examine that self-talk, or have you learned to quickly identify sick thinking? And what question attunes you to notice the difference readily?
I've been listening to my self-talk while you've been reading that question. It was all over the place. I'm not a terribly, what's the word, structured person. So times of self-reflection are somewhat spontaneous and impulsive, but when they come, I take them seriously. And that's one of the reasons I go trail running, long distance running. When I run, I have time to think. That's why I have a beautiful acre garden here. I can wander the garden and reflect, and I can listen in on myself. I'm a bit stressed. I'm a bit anxious today. What's going on for me? And so I do those 6 journal questions in my own head very quickly. And I listen to what's going on. Why am I nervous? Why am I apprehensive? Why am I down on myself today? Why aren't I concentrating or focusing on my clients or my wife or whoever? And I'm also aware that for me, it is a habit to focus on people's issues all day, every day. I have to be very aware of my own self-talk, because if it gets too loud, it'll completely distract me and I'll stop listening. And it's very embarrassing to be told something and then go, you know what, I didn't hear a thing she said. I'm going to have to ask her to repeat the whole thing. So I can't afford to let my self-talk eclipse my hearing ability. And if my self-talk is eclipsing my listening ability, then something is not right in my head or my life, and I need to attend to that and get it resolved before I carry on. My brain is saying something isn't at peace, something isn't right. You need to attend to that before you can concentrate. So in my job, like a helicopter pilot, I can't afford to be away with the fairies. And when my client's telling me something vital, he better have my total attention. And that's why I really do take monitoring my self-talk seriously, and not just my self-talk, but my tone of voice as well, and even where I'm looking. All of this stuff becomes second nature to a counselor as they practice.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, we're talking about realistic expectations. How do I determine when expectations and goals are realistic versus unrealistic for me?
Well, idealism results in frustration. If I'm getting snappy, snotty, frustrated, one of the first things I want to do is check that my expectations are not too high for myself. It might be assembling IKEA furniture with my wife. Now, that's good marriage breakup material, isn't it? So the first thing I do before I even read the instructions is I lower my expectations for my wife. Just kidding, for both of us. And then I read the instructions, and I know that I'm not going to be able to make sense of them. So once I've pretended to read them, I start assembling the kit. But I'm gentle on myself, I'm kind to myself, and I understand that it's only easy when you know how. And I understand that it takes 4 times as long to do it the first time as it will the second, third, or fourth time. And so I'm kind to myself, and I say encouraging things to myself is, why should I expect this to go smoothly? Why should I expect a child to hear me the first time I say it? Why should I expect my wife to always listen? Or why should I expect the car to do exactly what it's supposed to whenever it's supposed to? It's only a machine. If you're getting snotty, snarly, snappy, frustrated, uptight, anxious, OTT, if you're listening to your tone of voice, you know that it's time to lower those expectations. And if they're too low, then there's problems, disorganization, people talking past each other, there's chaos, and Hakuna Matata all over the place. So you got to tighten up. And it's a constant juggling act for where you set them, isn't it? Just be flexible about that and know where they are.
Okay, Dave, we're moving on to goal setting. And the question is, why are goals so important? And what should I do if I keep struggling to follow through with my goals?
Well, you know, without a goal, you're going to fire an arrow into the air, and then you're going to draw a target wherever the arrow lands. That's not really purposeful. You can entertain yourself, but nothing is achieved. And so goals are best understood as rungs in the ladder. What do you call a ladder with no rungs? It's a couple of sticks. And so goals give you progress. And Jesus was a goal setter. Absolutely he was. He set his face like flint for Jerusalem. He set his face for the cross. For the joy set before him, he achieved the goal, which was the crucifixion and resurrection, the ministry, the mission. He achieved it through goals. The thing is, goals must serve you. They mustn't scare you or bully you or dominate you. Many people avoid goals because they're terrified of them, because they expose them to the possibility of failure and disappointment. People wouldn't think like that if they understood goals properly. Goals can be adjusted. Goals can be changed. No pilot flies to Australia without readjusting his direction several times going across the Tasman. And you're just the same, whether it be to write a book, get a degree, start a church, buy your own house, or begin a business. Those goals must always be flexible, and they must always serve you. And when they become redundant or irrelevant, you must change them. Make sure they're your servants, not your masters. but make sure you have those servants, or you're going to wander without direction, and you're going to wander without purpose, and you're going to get very frustrated and become quite powerless sooner or later, financially powerless, or intellectually powerless, or relationally powerless. I'm just starting a singles weekend tomorrow for frustrated middle-aged singles, and we're going to do some goal setting. And do you know what our goal is going to be? To find a partner for life and nail that person. And I'm going to teach them how to do that. And it's not striving, it's not anti-faith, anti-Christian, or anti-being led by the Spirit. We're going to show them how walking with the Lord does not exclude setting goals and making them happen. You don't have to be a control freak to have goals, but goals will give you far more control in your life. And so for my money, nobody who's ambitious or wants to progress should be ignorant of goal setting.
And if I'm struggling to finish my goals, to achieve my goals,
break it down. They're too big. Just make them smaller, make them more realistic, make them achievable. Maybe you can't write a book, but you could write the first chapter. Maybe you can't do a degree, but you could do the reading for the first paper. Break it down.
So, Dave, this question is around balancing my needs with the needs of others, and I'm struggling to really get a grip on my own needs, because I feel that I should be more focused on helping others and meeting their needs.
Well, it's got to be in balance. Every day I do something for myself and something for other people. Big thing or wee thing doesn't matter. But every day I do some me time and I do some other time. Every day I reach out to make somebody else's life a little bit better. But every day I do something to make my own life a little better. It's never either or. And it's not even about you getting the balance right. It's just doing a bit of both every day, and the balance will come naturally. As long as you're not denying yourself in the service of others and losing track of who you are and what you are and where you're going, or living narcissistically for yourself only, or not actually caring about the needs of those around you. And that is the second and great commandment, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that balance is what we're all looking for. And by the way, that is the ultimate aim of counseling. That is the ultimate end of therapy. You will find that most counseling and therapy revolves around the need to get that balance right.
Thanks, Dave. We're moving on to our last question, and it's in relation to taking responsibility for your own choices. And maybe you could just comment on the role of sovereignty.
Yeah, the thing that keeps me going and enthusiastic for people, and I don't get so burdened that I can't sleep at night, and I don't burn out, and I don't worry about people making stupid choices every day. The thing that keeps me fresh and enthusiastic for my ministry and for people is that everything begins with respect for their freedom and their sovereignty, their right to set their life up however they like. People come to me when they're ready. Often it's 20 or 30 years too late, but it was when they were ready. And that's the point. When the pupil is ready, the teacher appears. And so I recognize that, and I don't fight it. There's a timing, and there's also self-discovery. Some people are wanting to become angels of heaven, and they're working towards becoming a saint in the kingdom of heaven and will shine as the stars forever. And others are content to be cockroaches. They hate the light, they hate the truth, and if anyone tells them the truth, they'll hate them as well. They're happy to become cockroaches. They are cockroaches by nature, and if you tell them the truth, stand well back, because they're going to explode. Some people just hate the truth. They hate the light, and I recognize and respect their sovereign right to do that, as does our Lord, who stands at the door and knocks. He never kicks it down. He never busts it down, and he's never out there panicking. He's just out there knocking until the person inside is ready and willing. And that's your sovereignty. If Jesus respects it, I have to too. And when people say to me, I wish so-and-so was at your course or listening to this or would come for counseling, I just say, but they don't want it. And you must receive that. They do not want a better life. They are content. They're content to be sick or angry or frustrated or depressed or burning out or browning out. They're content with their issue. If they didn't, they would be far more eager and enthusiastic about getting help. And I often find that many do-gooders haven't really begun their ministry by accepting this sovereignty. And as a result, they frustrate themselves, drive other people mad, and try and help people who don't want it. That's taking a hiding to nothing. I don't do that stuff anymore. That's for juniors and novice counselors. I'm over that.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so we're going to wrap up pretty much in the next couple of minutes, and I'm going to go back to Dave just for a final word.
Did we get right through the questions, or have we got a few?
Yeah, we have.
Great.
Thanks for that. And I would like to thank everybody for posting their questions. They've been great questions. And yeah, really appreciate that. Also really appreciate the input, you know, what you're putting into the community. That's really, it's all about supporting one another. But I also want to encourage you, if you're not really involved at the moment, if you're just kind of watching others, that's fine. But at some stage, it'd be great if you you know, post something there and get involved, because it is a critical part of your growth and you achieving your change.
Yeah, I've been watching the posts. Everyone's genuine, authentic, great to see.
Yeah, it's been amazing. So also make sure you check out the checkpoint at the end of the module. You'll see it there, and that has the goals that we're looking for you to have achieved through the module. And tomorrow we'll be releasing the new module, Trace, Face, and Replace, and that will be the topic for the next week. So again, just loving the activity on the community. Keep it going. And Dave, I'm going to hand back to you for the closing word.
Yeah, well, we're excited to see this fulfillment of God's promise. Nobody signed up without the help of the Lord, in my view, because this is his ministry and his mission. And we're learning too, so be patient with us while we get it all sorted out. But we believe that what we're going to be offering here, you guys are the first fruits. You are the seed. You are the beginning of something that I think is going to be worldwide and going to be very, very useful to humanity in general. So celebrate the fact that you're a part of it, as indeed do we, and put us to work, because we really are here to help you and serve you, and that's our heart.
Thanks, Dave.